Hey everyone, some people are very angry at Sophie Cunningham. I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and some people are upset at Sophie Cunningham, the Indiana Fever star, for something she said in a long ESPN profile. And somewhat shockingly, this profile from ESPN was quite fair, maybe even favorable. It included some criticisms, fair enough, but certainly didn't come at the Sophie Cunningham phenomenon, I think we can call it that now, from a woke or politically correct perspective. And in the course of this profile, she said this. ESPN asked her what she thinks of being called MAGA Barbie by some people on the internet. Projection, she says, because of what she looks like and where she's from. She'll weigh in on how to protect women's sports, she said, because she's in that world and feels qualified to speak to that world. Quote, I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans. And I'm like, I never once said that, she says. I think that I'm here to extend love. But I also think that love is truth, being honest. And I want to protect young girls in a locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men. All right, so what's going on here? Why are some people triggered by this? Well, some people consider her, as that ESPN article referred to, as a MAGA Barbie and don't like her for the same reason that a lot of people do like her. She's from Missouri. She feels as though she's kind of culturally conservative. She's pretty. She's feminine. She has a no BS attitude on the court. And in the big cultural and political battle in the WNBA over Caitlin Clark, she is emphatically on Caitlin Clark's side, of course, because Caitlin Clark is a teammate. And there was this famous incident that made Sophie Cunningham a much bigger phenomenon when she did this.
Sheldon going coast to coast. And here we got another breakers here as J.C. Sheldon goes right after Sophie Cunningham. That's a flagrant foul.
Now, it's obviously a hard foul. A lot of WNBA players have taken a lot of crap for their hard fouls against Caitlin Clark, for instance, but this played differently. And I think because a lot of fans experienced it as a form of frontier justice, this didn't come out of the blue. She's tackling an opposing player who had poked Caitlin Clark in the eye earlier in the game. So a lot of people like the idea of having a teammate back. Then there was this famous incident also a couple of weeks ago, the point heard around the world. So the whole point itself is kind of ridiculous. I think in an interview, she herself says it's the silliest thing she's ever done, but it's funny. It's memeable. She's photogenic. She's charismatic. So there's even been a meme about this comment I was talking about at the top in the ESPN story. Check this out. So all that's one reason some people are upset with Sophie Cunningham. But another element of it is that it's just very rare for prominent female athletes to speak so frankly about this issue. Now, that ESPN story is a little oblique in the text there, but it was clearly referring to something she had said previously on this issue. And I believe that is this clip.
I don't want to be unrealistic or delusional. Like, men are just stronger, bigger, athletic. Like, they just are a different build. And so if you put them up against females, I'm like, well, yeah, they're going to win. Duh.
So what she says there is just common sense, the biology, the two sexes different in all sorts of ways, including men tend to be, not all men, but men tend to be stronger, faster, more agile, certainly at the highest level of athletics. And that's not to disparage women's sports. It's just to say women's sports should be for women, which is what she says. And by the way, Serena Williams was very forthright about this question a couple of years ago.
It's a completely different sport. The men are a lot faster, and they serve harder, they hit harder. It's just a different game, and I love to play women's tennis, and I only want to play girls because I don't want to be embarrassed. I would not do the tour.
Also correct and commonsensical, but once you get through Cunningham and Williams, it's pretty scarce on the ground. Prominent female athletes being truthful about this, which brings us around to the opposite point of view and Megan Rapinoe, who was on The View just the other day saying this.
For years, you've been an outspoken advocate for so many people, including the trans community. And there's been a lot of debate about trans women in sports. And you recently wrote an article basically saying that anti-trans legislation is not actually about protecting girls, but distracting from us from what really matters. Tell us what you mean by that.
It's a beautiful article.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
I think what I mean by that is let's just like pull back a little. At first it was like, well, nobody likes women's sports and nobody wants to watch it. Or there was, abuse happening and nobody seemed to care. Now all of a sudden we're going to use a vulnerable group of people in the trans community to be like, oh, well, we're just protecting women's sports and we care so much about it. When the Heritage Foundation is now going to go after Title IX. So is it about reproductive rights or is it about just women's rights in general? We're seeing the rollback of Roe v. Wade, marriage equality, I feel like, is getting put back on the table. That was settled law. And so all of these things, like, yes, they're going after trans people in sports and they're using this as a wedge issue because we love sports and, we don't want our little girls to be unsafe in sports. And
So she's obviously, not surprisingly, given her politics, coming at this from a social justice perspective, where she's suggesting if you're in favor of abortion on demand or in favor of gay marriage, you must be in favor of biological males competing in women's sports. And that doesn't compute at all, not on a logical level and not on a practical level, because there are some, not a ton, but there are some left of center women who object to biological males playing in women's sports for the very same reasons as Sophie Cunningham and Serena Williams, more from Rapinoe.
now we're using this as like an overarching thing when really what we're attacking women. We're saying, if you look like this as a woman, you can play. If you look like this as a woman, there's a bill in.
All right, in no way is this an attack on women. You could say, I wouldn't agree with this characterization, that's an attack on biological males with gender dysphoria who want to participate in women's sports, but it's not an attack on women, nor is it an effort to impose a certain look on female athletes. It doesn't have anything to do with looks whatsoever. You just look across women's sports, whether it's the WNBA, whether it's golf, whether it's professional softball, whether it's soccer, whether it's hockey, all sorts of women, all sorts of shapes, all sorts of sizes, all sorts of different looks, all sorts of different ethnicities. Same way you have in men's sports. No one objects with that. It's not a matter of looks. It's a matter of basic biology. More from Rapinoe.
They don't like women in sports because it helps us with confidence and power. And we see so many women in the C-suite played elite level sports. It's just great for you physically and all of it. But it's an attack on women in society. And I think the tie between the Heritage Foundation now wanting to go after Title IX, it's just like so blatant. Like, let's connect these dots. It's more than just a couple of trans kids in the entire country and a couple in each state being able to participate in some youth sports.
Yeah.
Now, what she says there about the importance of women's sports is absolutely true. And I think it'd be a fair and legitimate point to say, hey, look, some guys didn't realize the importance of this soon enough. Took them a while to recognize it. But again, the idea of excluding biological males from female sports as an attack on women in society in general is also just completely crazy. And then she makes this point at the end that advocates of trans athletes in sports often make. We're just talking about a few athletes. What's the big deal? Well, if it's a small number of people, why don't you ask them, the small number of people, to compete against other guys? Why would that be so terrible? And she should know, as a competitor herself, just how important winning is to athletes. We're talking about athletes who spend years of training, practice, playing to get up to the highest level, and then to have someone else on the podium or someone else edge you out, not because they're better or more talented, not because they've trained harder, but just because they have this biological advantage, is felt as very unfair by a lot of female athletes. Now, there may be some who aren't speaking out about it, but we've heard a lot of really powerful testimonials to this effect over time. And by the way, Rapinoe should know this herself also on another level, because when she was on the national women's soccer team, I think she was injured, actually didn't participate in the scrimmage herself, but they played a scrimmage against 15-year-old boys. I think it was 15 and under, and the boys won, which is not to disparage, again, the women. It just goes to the different biology, levels of strength at work, etc. So if we are going to have a competition, speaking of competition, between Sophie Cunningham and Megan Rapinoe in terms of making sense on this issue, it's not even a close contest. Sophie Cunningham wins, going away. Hey, by the way, comment, like, subscribe. I promise you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.